What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel.
Okay, so picking up with Exo Manowar, this is actually really cool, the way that Robert Venditti does this, because this is like the prelude to Planet Death, right? I mean, Planet Death, I guess, is officially Volume 3, so this is kind of like Volume 2.5, if we had to give it a numerical designation, but the way that Venditti does this is really cool. So keep in mind, with regards to Valiant Comics, their whole big thing is their comics have to be easily accessible. That's like one of their major tenets, one of their major rules, that with Marvel, it can be kind of difficult to access their comics. You know, for example, in the next few weeks or so, probably halfway through March, we are going to put the brakes on Amazing Spider-Man. We're going to cover Matt Fraction's Immortal Iron Fist, and then we're going to come back to Amazing Spider-Man. But you can't just like pick up Matt Fraction's Immortal Iron Fist halfway through, right? Like, you really can't do that, because then you would be totally confused. You'd be like, what in the heck are the 7 heavenly cities? Like, what in the world's going on with all that? That's kind of the cool thing that Valiant has over Marvel and DC, is that they're really easy to just kind of jump into. And that's the whole point with Venditti, right? I mean, when you start going through this whole Exo Manowar, you have Volume 1 that introduces you to Exo, to Aric of DC. You have Volume 2, which is the introduction of Ninjak in the Exo Manowar mythos, and then you have Volume 3, which is him taking back off to Planet Death. So in Volume 2, we had talked about how the Exo armor basically was kind of considered to be something divine, in the sense that the divine alien race looked at the armor of Shannahara as a divine piece of armor, something that was really designed explicitly for them, only they should be able to wield it. But when they had gone around the universe and when they had finally arrived on Earth, they had grabbed a handful of humans and they were using them as a workforce. When Aric had basically escaped, when he had taken off and he had bonded with the armor, the Vine looked at this as though it was basically blasphemy, that that's not something that should be allowed to happen. In addition to this, when he had taken off back home to Earth, the whole idea, and really what Venditti's building up to, is kind of like this new version of Armorines. From, you know, those of you guys who remember Valiant back in the 1990s, it's kind of like a reimagining of Armorines, in the sense that the Vine were terrified of the idea that humanity would be able to reverse engineer this wildly powerful armor. And the result was that humanity would effectively be able to take out the entirety of the Vine race once they begin to commune with the armor and they learn what the armor's about, and they learn the intentions of the Vine. And so what we do is we basically pick up with this invasion fleet that's being sent to Earth for the purpose of wiping out all of humanity and taking the armor back. Now, the other half of this is we pick up with this fleet with regards to the character of Gafty. Now, this is a crazy thing, because remember, Gafty was believed to have been dead when Aric had escaped the Vine mothership. It was believed that Gafty had been killed in the conflict. What we find out is that he's not. Instead, he's being used as an experiment of sorts. He's being used really as a method of torture in order to find out more about Aric. Because remember, the Vine don't really know anything about him. All they know is that Aric was a guy who just donned the armor, took off back to Earth, was able to evade their efforts to capture him, and this has basically led to this invasion fleet. What we also learn here is that where we would look at the Vine race and say, okay, they're basically a spacefaring, cohesive, society, that is not that case. There's trouble in paradise. And the reason why is because from a military standpoint, really from a governing standpoint, the armor, if it can't be retrieved, needs to be destroyed. But the armor is considered to be divine by the priests of the Vine. And so because of this, it would be tantamount to destroying a religious relic. It would be tantamount to destroying everything that the entirety of the religion revolves around. And so for the priests of the Vine race, it's just kind of like, this cannot be allowed to happen, because if it does, it's tantamount to destroying everything that our race believes in, everything our race follows. But what we find out here is that there's a really tenuous situation between the military and the priests themselves. The military doesn't really care anything about the relics, the religions. They kind of consider that to be an archaic form of thought. The military really focuses on what's happening right now. Now, the cool thing about this is that this is like Robert Venditti talking about the modern day, right? I mean, he's really kind of drawing these metaphors for the modern day, in the sense that there are a lot of people that, really of the younger generation, they kind of look around and say, okay, religion is like an archaic concept. It's a representation of days gone by. It's time to move past the belief of deities and start focusing on science, what we can see, what we can focus on, different things like that. And it creates this really strong dichotomy, I guess, between those individuals that have faith versus those that rely on science. It's one of those eternal battles that will go on forever and ever. But at this point, we transition over to Alexander. Remember, Alexander is a guy who's basically working alongside Exo for the purpose of helping to try to stave off this invasion. The kicker to this is that when the whole team up happened between Alexander and the team up happened with Ninjak and with Exo, Alexander was basically banished. He was kicked out of the Vine race. Now, this is something that I kind of want to rehash for those individuals who had a few questions. What the Vine were doing earlier when they had first shown up on Earth is that they were basically replacing humans with Vine replicants, so that these Vine could basically have their remnants left behind. Now, under normal normal circumstances, the Vine would just, leave these plantings behind. They would just kind of disappear, and that would be it. They would never really have a reason to come back. That's what Alexander told us. But because of the fact that Aric is here with the exo armor, they are coming back to Earth. But the overall goal is for the plantings to just kind of be mingled into normal society, so nobody would really know that they were there. And that was the role that Alexander played. The other half of this is that within the Vine race, you have what are called gatherings. And gatherings are really just like these telepathic gatherings of the Vine from across the universe. So that, somebody on Earth could meet with, the head of the Vine race, or at least one of the Vine priests or something like that on the other side of the universe. It's a way to basically communicate without having to travel from one place to the next. But the idea here is that because Alexander has basically been ousted from the Vine race, he doesn't have any allies here. All the other plantings that were on his side, when he said, hey, look, I need your all's help, they said, nope, you've been ousted. We don't want to have anything to do with you. And it creates a wildly difficult situation because now he's on his own. It's just him and XO. He has no information coming from anybody. But the cool thing about this is that this is when Robert Venditti begins to dig a little deeper and give us a little bit more in terms of what this XO armor is capable of, in the sense that where Aric is basically wielding it and he's learning about it as we're learning about it, what we find out is that this armor is capable of tapping into these telepathic gatherings. Now keep in mind, Aric isn't actually going anywhere. Like physically, he's not leaving anywhere. Instead, what the armor does is it just teleports his mind. It allows him to tap into this telepathic meeting between these various members of the Vine race and the plantings they have on Earth. Now, of course, this is also kind of funny too. And the reason why I say that is because keep in mind, Aric is not the smartest tool in the shed. He comes from a much older age of society. And so with him, what we would consider to be like a knife or a sword, he finds something to be recognizable. For something like meeting in this telepathic place, he doesn't recognize or he doesn't realize that he's not in a physical location. And so he immediately starts attacking these guys. And of course, they begin to kind of make fun of him, poke at him a bit, say, hey, look, no, there's no use for weapons here. But what this does is it actually moves things toward the side of XO Manowar. And the reason why I say that is because now, with the XO armor able to tap into these gatherings, there's no safe place for the Vine to go. There's no safe refuge for them to meet, discuss battle tactics, so on and so forth, without anybody knowing what's going on. Instead, if they can access it, the XO armor can access it. And so the result is that they're basically kind of forced to go back to the drawing board. They're basically kind of forced to panic. And so in this last little tidbit here, in this first part, we of course have Commander Trill. Now keep in mind, Commander Trill was really the one that captured Aric when he first arrived on Earth. Commander Trill is kind of like the field commander, I guess, of the military, but he's also really depicted by Robert Venditti to be very proud, to be very arrogant, but to also be very, very skilled. And this is really just kind of this major battle in the sense of the two of these guys going against each other. It was the most logical outcome. And the reason why I say that is because, again, something that I hope you guys have noticed is that XO Manowar kind of goes in phases. It's really an organized and a structured way to read the story, which is one of the reasons why it's so easily accessible. You're introduced to the character. The character is given a piece of armor, a piece of equipment that will help them. The character runs into somebody who's basically a guide, kind of a mentor of sorts. And then the character goes on to fight their arch nemesis. It's the classic hero's journey is basically what this is. And keeping it structured, keeping it, organized, keeping it very easily accessible is what's helped him make it so popular, make it so successful. But the idea is that Commander Trill shows up. Now, something that I hope you guys notice is he shows up with a small contingent. It's him and two other guys. And this is just really the arrogance of Commander Trill coming into play, in the sense that he believes himself to be just as capable as this XO armor. The problem is that even with Aric being very primitive in terms of how he wields it, the fact that he doesn't wield it to its full potential still shows he's wildly powerful in terms of his abilities, because he overcomes both of these guys and then starts taking the fight to Commander Trill. Now, here's where the whole situation comes into play, because Commander Trill depicted himself as, hey, I'm a man of honor, I'm a man of combat, I do what it takes, I'll fight you to the death. But then we basically find out that he's a coward. And the reason why is because once he's on the losing side, he races off to the ship that they had landed on, and he comes back and he grabs Gafty. Now, despite being depicted as a coward in terms of how he fights, essentially hiding behind a friend of Aric of Dacia, it's still very effective, because this is now psychological warfare. It's now having, engaging in a conflict in a way that will mess with the mind of Aric. And the reason why is because he believed his friend to be dead. The funny thing about this is that Commander Trill is no true warrior. And the reason why is because when he looks at Aric, he's like, hey, look, I have your friend. If you don't surrender, I'm going to kill your friend. Now, of course, Aric lets his guard down. He lets the armor go. He basically surrenders it. In response, Commander Trill kills Gafty, and Aric lashes out. I mean, he absolutely loses it. But that's kind of the crazy thing, is because Commander Trill didn't really have any idea what he was doing. One of the things that was easily established in the very beginning of the story is that the armor of Shanhara really has a mind of its own. down. That's how it decides who gets to lift it and who doesn't. It's very, Mjolnir in that sense, the hammer of Thor. That's a lot of the relationships that go on in comic books. A lot of comic book publishers, grab things from other publishers, and it's a trade-off back and forth. With regards to this particular story in Valiant Comics, you very much have this Marvel Comics hammer of Thor situation where the armor of Shannara chooses who it is that gets to wield it. And the result is that where X-O Manowar had cast the armor off in an attempt to basically show that he was basically giving up, that he was surrendering here, the result is that once he puts the armor back on, he takes it to Commander Trill. And Commander Trill has no idea what's going on. Commander Trill has no real understanding of the conflict that's taking place. Of course, he's calling for backup. He's calling for guys to help him where he can. But the issue is that while these ships are coming in, he's getting absolutely destroyed by X-O. Now, the crazy thing about this is that in the middle of this whole conflict, Gafty suddenly reemerges. This is when we find out that he didn't actually die. The cool thing, though, is that X-O is beginning to understand the capabilities of the armor. And that's the great thing about this, is Venditti's he's not like, hey, like you have this guy, Aric Darcy, and he just has no idea how any of this stuff works. He has no idea how any of this functions. He just throws the armor on and that's it. He's starting to understand how the armor works. And one of the first things that he recalls is that where his hand had previously been cut off while he was aboard the Divine Mothership, the armor healed his hand. And so what he does is he tells the armor, heal Gafty, bond with him and heal him. Now, the other thing that Venditti seems to do here is with the X-O armor, it seems to be like this outward manifestation of really what a person's feeling, how a person views the world, in the sense that when it bonds itself to Gafty, it takes on a completely different appearance. Not wildly different, but different enough in the sense that it, the spikes and the scars and the shards and so on and so forth seem to reflect the mindset of Gafty, in the sense that his mind is very much in a state of flux. He's really kind of bordering on the realm of insanity, and this comes to fruition when he starts attacking Aric. And the reason why is because you got to keep in mind, the entire time that Aric was here, Aric thought he was dead, but in Gafty's mind, he's been tortured all this time. And so it almost seemed like Aric basically left him there, that Aric abandoned him there. Now again, Gafty's not thinking clearly, he's not thinking rationally, he's thinking emotionally, and he's thinking with a state of insanity. Now, of course, Aric's able to talk some sense into him and say, hey, look, man, we fought side by side for years and years and years. We will overcome this. You have to regain your mind. And that's the great thing, because that's exactly what Gafty does. Gafty begins to sort of come to, he begins to understand where it is that he's at, what it is he's doing. But we also get this last glimpse of heroism, in the sense that with the armor communicating with him, he says, look, the fleets are coming. The fleet is coming here. The only way for us to basically be victorious, to keep the Earth from being destroyed, is to destroy the fleet. And so Gafty, in this last moment of heroism, races off, flies into space, and begins the process of tearing these fleets apart. Now, of course, that's the cool thing about the armor, is because it's literally a one-man army. That's all you need. And that's the reason why it's so significant to the Vine. I mean, it has its own religious relic element to it. Yes, the priests look at it as something that is representation of their whole race's history. For the military, this is a weapon. That's why they've been having different members of the Vine race try it on, all of whom have died, is because for the military aspect of the Vine society, if they're able to harness this exo armor, they can use it for virtually anything. And so that's the whole panic here, is this armor is wildly powerful. If you have an alien race and there's slews of this armor, well, suddenly they go from being a mildly primitive race across the vastness of the universe of space to being one of the most formidable races in the universe itself. And what happens is Gafty proves this when he basically begins channeling the energies of the armor and wipes out the mothership. I mean, just totally obliterates the Admiral's ship. And so the result is that the invasion fleet is effectively gone. Now, of course, Gafty dies in the process. It's really him just sort of vanishing. That's the last bit of it. And so what we do is we pick up with the tail end of this. We pick up with Venditti setting the stage where he says, look, in the eyes of X-O, he's lost his friends. He's lost his wife. He's lost his life. He's lost everything that had any real significance in his existence. And so he looks at the Vine as the cause of it. And so his goal is to basically travel back to the Vine homeworld and unleash absolute hell. I mean, really bring on a reckoning, the likes of which they've never seen before. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, X-O Manowar is pretty solid. I really hope you guys are digging it. But yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.